Today, while I was out for a walk, I came across this old television receiver that had been left behind. It looks quite old and doesn't seem to be working anymore. But instead of leaving it there, I decided to bring it home and take a closer look to see if there was anything useful inside. First, I'll use a screwdriver to remove all the screws from the casing. Once all the screws are removed, I open the cover and start inspecting the components inside. After taking a closer look, I noticed that the internal wiring has been broken. However, the circuit board still looks relatively intact, and I think it can be reused for this project. So instead of throwing the receiver away, I'll close the casing back up and start converting it into a homemade antenna. Every like and subscription motivates me to create more creative DIY projects. Thank you so much for your support. Here, I have an old smartphone battery. First, I apply some hot glue to the receiver casing, then place the battery on top and secure it firmly. This keeps the battery in place and makes the next connection steps easier. Next, I'm going to use two RCA connectors to create the connection between the television receiver and the battery. I attach the two connectors to the connection ports on the back of the receiver. Once they are positioned correctly, I prepare the ends of the connector wires. I strip away the outer insulation to expose the copper cores inside and prepare them for soldering. Next, I solder the wire from the RCA connector firmly to the contact point on the battery. I repeat the same process with the remaining wire and solder it to the second connection point on the battery. With that, the two connection wires between the RCA connectors and the battery are complete and ready for the next stage of the build. Here, I have an antenna connector that will serve as the connection point between the receiving system and the antenna. Next, I prepare a section of signal cable to create the receiving element for the antenna. First, I strip away the outer insulation from one end of the cable to expose the copper core inside. Then, I gather the shielding wires together into one group and arrange them neatly to create a proper connection point. Next, I attach the antenna connector to the prepared end of the signal cable. This creates the connection point between the receiving section and the antenna components that will be added in the following steps. At the other end of the signal cable, I strip a longer section to create the receiving element. First, I remove the black outer insulation. This video is for educational purposes only and is intended for DIY enthusiasts. Projects involving soldering, electricity, and mechanical tools can involve potential risks. Always wear appropriate protective equipment, follow proper safety procedures, and use tools correctly. Do not attempt any dangerous procedures if you do not have the necessary knowledge or experience. Then, I continue removing the silver-colored shielding underneath to expose the copper core. Next, I carefully use a utility knife close to the copper core to separate the remaining plastic insulation more easily. This exposes the copper conductor clearly while also keeping it separated from the shielding layer. Once the cable is prepared, I will reuse a soda can to create a reflective dish for the antenna. First, I drill a small hole right in the center of the bottom of the can. This opening will later be used as a connection point for the signal cable. Next, I use sandpaper to smooth the area around the bottom of the can. This helps wear down and smooth out any sharp metal edges created during drilling, while also making the bottom section easier and safer to separate. After that, I separate the bottom section from the rest of the can. Once finished, I have a round piece of metal with a curved surface that can be reused as the reflective dish of the antenna. Next, I attach the metal dish to the copper core of the signal cable. I pass the copper core through the hole in the center of the dish and carefully adjust it into the correct position. Then, I use hot glue to secure the metal dish to the signal cable. The glue helps prevent the dish from moving during use and makes the entire receiving structure more stable. Next, I use pliers to cut off the excess copper wire sticking out from the front. Once the receiving dish is finished, I connect it to the television receiver. I plug the antenna connector into the connection port on the back of the receiver and check it again to make sure the connection is secure. At this point, the receiving element is connected to the television receiver, and the antenna system is almost complete and ready for a real-world test. Next, I use a section of USB charging cable to create the connection between the signal cable and the antenna device. First, I strip the end of the wire to expose the copper core and prepare it for the connection. Next, I use a section of coaxial cable to carry the signal from the antenna to the TV. First, I remove the black outer insulation from the end of the cable to expose the metal shielding mesh underneath. Then, I gather all the shielding wires together and twist them neatly into a separate branch. Next, I carefully remove the white insulation surrounding the center conductor to expose the copper core. Once everything is prepared, I take the red wire from the USB cable and twist it tightly around the copper core of the signal cable. I make several twists to create a secure connection and help maintain a stable signal path. Next, I wrap electrical tape tightly around the connection. This helps keep the copper core isolated from the shielding mesh, reducing the risk of short circuits while also protecting the connection from becoming loose or oxidized. After that, I connect the remaining wire from the USB cable to the twisted shielding branch of the coaxial cable. Finally, I wrap another layer of electrical tape around the entire connection. This keeps the wires neat, reinforces the joint, and helps prevent the wires from being pulled apart or damaged during use. At the other end of the cable, I attach a TV connector jack. This connector allows the cable to plug directly into the antenna input on the TV, making installation more convenient. Finally, I connect the signal cable to the antenna device. Now, I'm going to test this homemade antenna in real-world conditions. First, I'll switch to a TV channel to check the signal reception without connecting the antenna. As you can see, without the antenna connected, the TV only displays the message, no signal. Next, I'll connect the DIY antenna to the signal input on the back of the TV for the actual test. And here is the result. Almost immediately after connecting the antenna, the TV channels begin to appear. The picture is clear, the colors remain stable, and there are no continuous signal interruptions. To make the test more convincing, I'll perform one more experiment. I disconnect the antenna from the TV and observe the signal changes. As soon as the antenna is unplugged, the screen instantly returns to the no signal message. All channels disappear, confirming that the signal truly came from this homemade antenna. Now, I'll reconnect the antenna once again. As you can see, within just a few seconds, the channels reappear and continue working normally. This proves that many electronic parts that seem to have only one purpose can be reused in completely different and surprisingly useful ways. Not only does this save money, but it also opens the door to many more exciting DIY ideas. If you enjoyed this project or found it helpful, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support motivates me to continue creating more repair, recycling, and DIY projects in the future. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.